And next speaker is Tom Anderton. He is a partner at K&L Gates. And actually, we're going to host a couple of in-person events at his office soon. So I'm pretty excited about that. But Tom, also, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that your current client is one of them is a bioprinting company.
It is.
Uh,
Yep, you
uh,
can say that, sure.
okay, it's Prellis Biologic, and I know them for years.
Yeah,
Um,
they're
so
great.
so yeah, so Tom, you definitely more experience in the bioprinting space. Love to hear your work in the space and how do you help startup?
Sure. I mean, I heard Julian say that, he talked about vulture capitalists and how they're predatory.
Yes.
I jokingly, I mean, so one of the things that I love is small companies, because as I jokingly say, pound for pound, that's where the smart people are. But problem is you got to protect yourself from big companies and predatory venture capitalists, vulture capitalists, as he calls it. When the VCs walk in the room, I jokingly say you can smell the sulfur. They can't hide the fact that these folks are the devil. So you've got to be a little bit careful about what you do and what you say. Um, Legal is, and I'll say this, this is one of my mantras almost, as it were. All this legal stuff you've learned, you knew since you were in second grade. It's all ridiculously intuitive. A lot of times you're just sort of finding your way to get to the answer. I should tell you a little bit about who I am first. My name is Tom Anderton. I'm a partner at K&L Gates. I am a scientist at heart. I did my training at Stanford Medical School. I'm a geneticist and a molecular biologist and a cancer biologist. I spent 15 years in-house. I interviewed for a company I remember in the late 90s called Sugen. Do you remember Sugen, Jenny Chen?
90s. I barely moved to this country.
Sugen is interesting. They were the first company to transfect cell lines with receptor tyrosine kinases and do high throughput screenings. It was a place where, Nobel Prize winners were
Hmm.
walking around the halls. And I remember when they interviewed me in the late 90s thinking, there's no way I'm smart enough to be hired by these people. And they made me an offer. And it was one of those places where, it was on my resume and the rest of my life, people would say, oh my gosh, you worked for Sugen. Holy crap.
I need
It
to
was a
look
great
that up.
place. Pardon?
I need to look that up. There are a lot of these histories in that space. I think now it's becoming very relevant, actually.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. It's still relevant. They have a compound called Sutent, Sutent. It's in Pfizer's portfolio. It's still multi standard of care for many, many cancers. It's a small molecule receptor tyrosine kinase inhibitor. And small molecule is interesting because that's, 25 years ago, that's the way they used to do things. You probably know, Jenny, that there's only two things a cancer drug has to be. It's got to be strong, which is really, really, really easy to do. And it's got to be selective, which is really, really, really hard to do.
Right.
So the old technology, the small molecule stuff, was based on the fact that cells proliferate quickly. And so cancer cells proliferate more quickly than others. If you can somehow target that proliferation rate, you can actually get the bad guys and not the good guys. But
Yeah.
there's inevitably a whole bunch of fallout.
Yeah. A lot of rat poisons at the beginning of the history. So yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
indeed. Indeed.
We still have some rat poison out there people use.
Um, I wrote some of the original VEGF patents. I spent 15 years in-house. Started off small at Sugen. I was, patent counsel and then head of the department. Sugen was supposed to be a one-time thing, but I wound up picking up another 5 jobs throughout the years. Sort of got addicted to small company life. Um, Ridiculously smart people there. The downside is you're looking for a job every 3, 4, 5 years because you always the end game is always the same. You always wind up partnering the company with somebody. I ultimately wound up being general counsel for the largest device company in China called Mindray, and did that gig for a couple of years. And then at some point, quite frankly, just got sick of moving my boxes from place to place, and so went back in-house. Sorry, back in private practice. And so now I'm a partner at K&L Gates. I do the same thing. I have the same clients, a lot of times they're friends. Their offices were right down the hall from mine at one point. I just don't have to move my boxes every 3, 4, 5 years. They're the ones that move. The people that found these companies are usually of the same nature. They don't want to work for the big companies because the big companies are just not what they're looking for. And so, they found a company, that company gets acquired, big company says, you want to, join, and they're like, nah, I'm gonna go do something else. Which is cool because you get to keep those clients forever. Spending 15 years in house, my philosophy on legal has developed relates to essentially being able to line up cost and benefit. If you cannot draw a direct line, and that's because I spent a lot of my time either in a CFO's office or a CEO's office justifying my cost. I was a purchaser of legal services myself once for a long time. And so I had to make sure that what I was buying actually made sense with respect to the company. Okay. That's especially important with respect to small companies and especially important with respect to IP because IP is ridiculously expensive. So you need to be able to say what is important, what are the benefits that you're getting for this IP, and is it justified by cost? One of the things I do with almost all my clients up front is I will put them through what I call a rational tiering or monetization scheme. Meaning sort of work through what the products or product candidates are, what those potential net present values of those product candidates would be, and as a result, what the legal spend tied to that is going to be. Does that make sense?
I actually really love that. This is actually the first time I ever heard anyone talking about this, to be honest. And I know it's definitely on every founder's radar, like how expensive things are, but I never
Yeah.
thought anyone systematically, produce a framework to think about
Yep.
this.
I've got a framework. I can send it to you, Jenny. I'm
Yeah,
surprised we've never talked about it before.
well, maybe just me ignorant. That's probably what it is. But
Ah,
I've never heard of this.
yeah, it's one of the things I've always done. One of the things that it does, a couple of things that it does is, as I mentioned, all this legal stuff you'll learn in second grade and it's intuitive. And a monetization or rational tiering system, justification for costs actually, interestingly enough, creates a common language that everybody speaks. So everybody talks about, oh, this is this type of case or that type of case. And that's extremely important in a small company because when you're consistently in due diligence phase, you need to all be rowing in the same direction, speaking the same language, as it were. So that sort of thing actually does that. It also makes due diligence a whiz. I've been through due diligence about 1,000 times. One of the important things, obviously, is that everybody says the same things in due diligence and that nobody says things that are inconsistent, which happens all the time. You know, no IP portfolio, no due diligence is perfect. The goal is to minimize the imperfections. And, if you look organized, you're going to get through things quickly. That said, I am a scientist, so I sort of take a nuts and bolts approach to building an IP portfolio from the ground up. Okay, I'm acutely aware of the fact that IP informs absolutely all decisions, all 3D bioprinting decisions, for example. And so you have to sort of make sure that you've considered it for everything. That includes HR agreements, partnering agreements, the actual patents themselves are things that you have to be drafting with respect to an eye towards actually looking towards how they're going to look in the due diligence room. What sorts of questions are they going to elicit and what sorts of answers are they going to produce. Company value is actually maximized by aligning those things and all the IP claims. Jenny, I know we have time constraints, so I don't want to run over.
Yeah, I just realized I don't know if our marketing person is going to show up. So maybe we have a little bit more time than I thought. So you can have a couple more minutes, is what I'm
Okay.
saying. Yeah.
Graciously presented by Jenny Chen, the extra minute.
Yes.
Oh, by the way, this is behind me. You probably know that's the 20th Century Analytical Philosophy Library that we've talked about. So that's Wittgenstein and Russell, and I collect
Wow.
those things. You and I talked about that like
Impressive.
1,000
Yeah,
times.
maybe. Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah.
Impressive, impressive bookshelf.
It's one thing I love. So anyway, one of the things we do with respect to that, because I've been through due diligence so many times, my team, we're looking constantly for what stuff is going to look like when you go through due diligence. I've been doing this for 25 years. I've been in litigation twice in my life, uh, meaning it almost never happens. My companies are really sensitive to that. The last thing they need is litigation. We're looking to make sure that there's absolutely no litigation traps. We're constantly sort of looking at IP from the nuts and bolts up, from the science up, the data up. Um, we do patentability searches, prep and process of complex patents, freedom to operate, non-infringement, of course, due diligence. All the transactional work should be sort of reviewed and dovetailed with respect to the IP, especially in the 3D bioprinting and the life sciences field.
Can
So
you
you're
expand on the transactional work? Like, what does that mean?
So the transactional work is going to include pretty much anything. So these are everything as simple as the HR agreements that you have coming in. When you have somebody who joins a company, they're going to be sets of agreements that guarantee that they assign the rights from themselves to the
Hmm.
company.
Right.
That's something that is going to be looked at and scrutinized pretty carefully in due diligence. The CDAs, you're going to want to make sure that you have, and these are simple agreements, CDAs and MTAs. Want to
Hmm.
make sure that you have no glitches, that you don't have any glitches with respect to the IP, that there's nothing in there that could compromise the IP portfolio. And then more complex agreements, when you start doing things like letting people look at your stuff and granting them a non-exclusive license to do that if they're testing things, like Pfizer, for example. Um, as I mentioned, these people can't help themselves. You can smell the sulfur when they walk in the room. There's going to be some clause in there that says that there's a perpetual grant of rights uh,
Mm.
to your IP. You need to make sure that that kind of thing is scrubbed from the agreement. Okay. And then everything up to the complexity of like merger agreements. If you've ever seen a 3D bioprinting or a life sciences merger agreement or partnering agreement,
Yeah.
80% IP. So you're sort of thinking about the IP. There's always a vein of IP that runs right through the middle of those things. Does that make sense, Jenny?
Yeah, I'm thinking about that. I actually had a startup's exit through merging, and actually it was a good exit for me, but I did not remember seeing that document anywhere. So I don't, yeah, it's like I feel embarrassed that I should have seen a merger agreement somewhere because I actually had one
It could have
exit.
been a partnering agreement. There's a
Oh
whole
yeah,
bunch of
yeah, I
different
think it's
ways to do
what,
it.
yeah, yeah, okay.
Yeah. And merger agreements are euphemistically called partnering agreements by a whole bunch of folks.
I think that's what it is. Yeah.
So when Sugen was acquired in the late 90s, Sugen was fiercely independent and proud. Okay. And Sugen merged with Pharmacy and Upjohn.
Hmm.
Really, they were acquired by Pharmacy and Upjohn, but nobody ever said that. They actually said they merged or partnered with, or, the agreements were all called partnering agreements, Jenny.
I see. Yeah.
And I think a lot of that reason, or my opinion is, I think that that was to protect the egos of the Sugen founders, because they didn't want to say that they were sucked up into a bigger company, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's
Um,
what exactly what it was, but I didn't read, obviously, the degree of scrutiny that you would recommend. I mean, also, I'm not a decision maker, so
you know what? Sorry.
I'm not a decision maker for that acquisition.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I'm just a bystander investor,
Ah.
the non-predatory type.
The very rare non-predatory type. Um, yes. So, I mean, all of those agreements need to be dovetailed with IP and company value, operations, even sales. I mean, you don't do much sales up front when you're developing things, but HR and privacy agreements and things like that all need to be scrutinized.
So Tom, just a quick question. I
Sure.
mean, of all these work that a startup have to, pay for these IP work, like what time do you think they should approach you? Like, should they approach you when they incorporate it, like Julian just helped them incorporate it, and then they should just come to you right away? Or like, what do you suggest?
Well, I mean, they should do it up front. The sooner the better. I often will, quite frankly, up front. A lot of times, I don't bill for a lot of things. Just
Hmm.
because I want to make sure that I follow that. Got to draw a direct line between cost and benefit. Okay,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean that things shouldn't be looked at. Because there's a temptation. I'll give you a great example. Early stage companies often want to talk about stuff outside of the CDA,
Hmm.
and I think that you probably need some lawyer in the process, especially some tech lawyer, somebody with a technical background, looking at their technology and saying, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, wait a minute," tell them just enough to get them interested, but not too much, so that you wind up, disclosing something that's confidential.
Hmm.
Okay, and that's sort of an early stage interaction. Does that make sense?
So if I'm a founder, I got my C Corp, um, and I approached you, how does the pro bono part of your work? Like, do you like have intro meeting with people and then like, not pro bono, but sometimes, some firm provide, non-equity or kind of, I don't know how you call this again, like where you don't have to pay money up front, but
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. We
do
do
you have,
that.
oh, okay.
We have
And
deals that we structure.
yeah, what do you
Um,
call that again? That kind of more non-monetary transaction, but maybe, um, I don't know if they actually get equity, to be honest.
yeah, yeah. Well, sometimes we do equity investments. Sometimes we do deferred fees. I think that's what you're thinking.
Deferred fee, yeah,
Yeah,
something like that. So you have like a variable programs for different kind of companies. It's
right,
not like standard.
right. And the I don't bill for stuff up front. I think Matt may be listening, so you didn't hear that. We didn't talk about that.
Okay, well, this is gonna go on to social media.
There you go. No,
Okay,
but in all seriousness,
yeah,
it's important to have that stuff looked at and scrutinized up front.
yeah.
I think a clearer answer is I often, because I see these all the time, are looking at pitch decks and elevator pitches and reviewing the substance of those, and not only looking at those with respect to the technical substance and patentability and things like that, but also um, what does this look like? I have a good feel and a good sense for, um, you know, venture capitalists are essentially walking egos. And so I've got a good sense for how to appeal to that, how to sort of,
We
uh,
have some venture capitalists online, just so you know, Tom.
oh, shucks, sorry about that. I meant that in the best possible way.
Yes, I'm sure.
But
But
no,
anyhow, yeah,
sometimes you
with
have to appeal to that aspect of things, and that
for
that
sure.
requires a certain finesse for a small company to sort of pitch to their audience, as it were. And the pitch deck is important. Sometimes, if you have a slide that's got too much on it, nobody's gonna look at it. So direct answer to your question is upfront, Jenny. We should be looking at that stuff up front.
There are so many things I would love to talk to you offline, to get your advice and feedback on some of the decks that we received. But I don't have, your legal perspective on, what's wrong with these decks could potentially be wrong. Would be good advice to give to future startups as well.
Yeah, yeah. Love to do that.
Yeah.
A lot of this stuff, it goes back to that, what I talked about up front. A lot of this stuff is stuff you learned in second grade. It has an extremely intuitive feel to it. When you're
Hmm.
reviewing decks, does this sound right? Does it feel right? Does it look good? All that stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So Tom, you're more than welcome to put your contact in the chat box.
Sure.
Like I said, this is gonna go on somewhere in social media. So, so yes, I think Matt is gonna know at some point. And I want, but it sounds like, to be honest, I feel like you're a super relationship guy. It sounds like founders can just approach you for, maybe a free intro session to see where things are. I'm not gonna offer too much stuff on your
Oh,
behalf, but it sounds like at least they can get like one FaceTime small session with you to just to figure out if they need some work.
indeed, indeed. My clients have my cell phone. They often text me on the weekends, and many of them have been at I've had dinner with them at
Yeah,
at my house many times. They're friends,
love it.
only friends.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom, and hope
My
to see you
pleasure. Thanks
soon.
for having me, Jenny. You're the greatest as always.
Thank you. I don't think I'm the greatest, but thank you.